Every soul is a candle. Every soul is a
Hello, everybody. Hi, the recording is in progress. This is Phillip Namanworth, Creative Spirituality. Welcome back. We had some technical difficulties before, but we started over. And with the help of our technical geniuses and helpers and prayers and charity, we got it back on again. Thank you, Shlomo, for running the class tonight. Lindy's away, and Pace and Uncle Stephen for all their help. Hopefully, Uncle Stephen will get back soon. If Chandra know him. Well, tonight is this week is the last chapter in the fourth book of the Torah. The fourth book of the Torah is called Bamidbar, which means in the desert. The English translation of the fourth book is, they call it the Book of Numbers. Because in the beginning of the book, there's a lot of counting of the tribes. And each tribe is privy to the counting and the personality, so to speak, of the other tribes, so that things don't get tribal. Even though we belong to a certain group, we share many interests with other Jewish groups. And because we're all in the same basic family, and that's why it's important for the tribes to where they were listening when they were being counted. The same thing about our personality types. I had a song once that said, "Some folks just drive you crazy," which means that certain personality traits that you have or someone else has, the other person is not so used to or comfortable with, but we all have them all. And we can find that place inside us where we can always relate to someone else, especially when we're in close quarters with someone, say you're working together, or we just meet them, which cuts down judgment. Judaism is meant to sharpen your judgment, but lessen your judging. Judging is making decisions about people right away, often without thinking about it, just responding to a feeling. I'm not talking about when we think there's danger. It's just we are who we are. We're all from different tribes. And the first of the two chapters tonight, it's one of the, I think, 6 times during the year that 2 chapters are read at the same time. There's a number of times that happen. When that happens, it means the 2 of them are connected. I think Hukas and Balak is another one, and there's a bunch of others. Nitzavim, Vayelech, Nitzav, and Pekude, and a number of others. So let's take them one at a time. This week's chapter is called Matos. Amy, how wonderful, an old friend and just family member for us. This is Amy, the reggae DJ. and just soulful personality. Matos is an interesting word because it means the branch of a tree. Now, each tribe is called a mate, a tribe, but there's another word for tribe called shevet. Shevet, shevet achim gam yachad, when all the tribes go together. And they describe states of being because the tree is the root that we all come from. We're all connected to the same spiritual root, the same spiritual tree where our souls come from. Shevet represents a branch that has newly been taken from the tree and is still moist. You wouldn't necessarily burn it at that stage or anything. But it's still pliant and it's not firm as a mate. And a mate is a stick that has been disconnected from the tree and it's become very hard, and people can use it as a staff. And they represent two different stages in a way. A shevet, a pliant branch, is like the Jews when we had the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, we understood where we came from. We understood we were created beings with the possibility of thinking of individuality and our own existence. But we understood, like when people went to the Beis Hamikdash, they understood there was holiness because it was obvious there. The gates of heaven were open. So even though the soul was not on the highest level, it was still very connected and it had access to the highest levels. A mata is when a tree has been separated for so long, you could think it's just a stick. It's very firm and it can't be moved. It's not as flexible. And that's the name of this week's Parsha, Matos, something that's a little bit inflexible. But our strength comes from certain abilities to hold our bottom line. And the next Parsha after that we're also reading is called Massei. Massei means journeys. So you have another situation where there's a confluence or a coming together of opposites. Massei is a journey. It says, Ve'ela Massei. These are the journeys of the Jewish people since they left Egypt. And it even mentions the places where they stop, because even when you stop as part of a journey to go to the next place. So it reflects an attitude of flexibility. So the first chapter reminds us that we have to have a bottom line strength. And the second one reminds us that we have to have a certain amount of flexibility. And of course, this is where we all can run into trouble. You know, there are halachas and there are ways of being. And there are personality types who are drawn to those different ways of being. So the Baal Shem Tov says about the last chapter, these 42 journeys are symbolic of the 42 journeys that each human being takes from the minute of birth. Now, they start in the Torah from Ramses, which is on the 15th of Nisan in the year 2448, when the Jewish people came out of Egypt. And since then, you can say Well, why would you possibly say that these are the journeys of the Jewish people once that who coming out of Egypt? When the first day we were out of Egypt, we were out. The rest is not coming out of Egypt. But this is a good question, and it's phrased in a particular way to make you ask that question. Sometimes we could think about something happening on our lives and we could say, I don't understand this. But perhaps it was presented to you in that manner so that you would ask, what significance does it have? Because things are not haphazard. You may not find out why, but anybody who's ever read a mystery novel or seen some other thing always goes, I wonder why that happened or what's going to happen. But we don't do that with our life. We seem to think something is random, and we know that Hashgacha Prata says the Hashem is involved in every movement of a leaf turning. So now we have a question of these are the journeys since we came out of Egypt. As we've studied before, a number of times, the word for Egypt is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim means a place of limitations and boundaries. So basically, anytime a person is freed or frees themselves from one level of existence to get to a higher consciousness on the next level, even if it's not the highest, it's a little bit higher, you're no longer in that same place. In fact, you have to forget about it to actually move on. But now that place has become a place that you have to move higher to from. So it's a constant stepping up. So you're constantly coming out of Egypt. So it says in Pesachim and Talmud, Chayavorim Liroses Atzmum. Every day a person should think that they just treat themselves like just came out of Egypt. In other words, there's always a higher place to climb. There's always a higher consciousness. And, you may sit in one place for a while, and when it's time to move on, either you'll move on or the universe will talk to you and show you that something needs to be fixed. Most artists that I've met always want to do a little bit better in their next project. Say, I did that when it worked last time, but we're always open, even if you're going with the same set list or something, to something new happening, because you're not exactly the same person. As I was discussing with Brian before we came on, it says, Mechadesh betuvo v'chol yom tomid maaseh breshis. God recreates the universe every second. Now, a statement like that is huge, because one would think once something is alive, it just goes because it's alive. Well, the fact is that's only the way things go when they were created by humans. So if you're a human, all of us are human, and we make something, a jar, you make an artwork, you make a ceramic dish. After you put it down, it still exists. Doesn't need you anymore. If you write a book, the book's out of your hands. But the creation of life is not like that. The universe functions because the same original energy which created the universe is always operative. It says in Psalm 119, I think, verse 86, your word stands in the heaven forever. In other words, the same statement that said, let there be a firmament, or let us create man, is still operating. And that exact source is still giving you life, but every minute it's fluctuating, it's flowing back and forth. So each day we can say is new, even though situations and circumstances might be challenging. Now, just to flip back and forth, which is a little bit of my style, unfortunately or fortunately, we go to 42 journeys, but just think of life having a certain amount of journeys, but what do we do about the times that really stink? This is a downtime for me. The challenge in life is to realize that even that place is an opportunity for you to leap from, to go higher. So it's all one life. Hashgacha pratis comes whether we can see it or not, whether we understand it or not. We can think of it that way. And of course, and when things get rough, we actually have time for mourning, right? We have time for kvetching, but it can't be our attitude. It has to be, that's what I'm feeling right now, but I understand. Or is it better not to? Shall I just think things are happening to me? And we all know people who blame the entire world for everything that happens to them, and you could see how they live their lives. But to add to the equation, I often have said that the Torah gives you a number of options. There's the option you were born with, there's the option you developed, and then there's the Torah option, which can elaborate and give beautiful light and expansion to your own choices of how to look at things. If a person lives by, from the minute I was born is the minute I started to die, which is true in some level. If that's your life, why? And your life is why bother? Because nothing's getting, whatever I do, it's gonna end in this world. We don't believe it ends in the next world, but if you go around with that attitude, you don't tend to be the kind of person who has tremendous vitality. Let's put it that way. And what is vitality? Vitality, I think we would all agree, is like when the car engine's working well, the spark plug gap is exactly the right thing. You turn on the key and the engine kicks in and the car's working on all 8 cylinders. And when it starts to sputter, you know that something's clogging it up. So sometimes what happens to us, because we're human beings, is that we get a little clogged up. Something seems to be challenging us. Now, we each have to find our own individual way to work with that. And part of why we get together and speak to each other all week or all the time, and to have good friends who we can count on, is for the help them to get past those places so that we can revitalize, because life happens to everybody. And we shouldn't go looking for experiences that we need to have to prove that. Enough things will happen in a person's life that you don't need to go looking for challenges. Believe me, unless you feel like nothing's happening in your life, you want to take some risks in something safe. The spies went into the land in Parshat Shlach, and they said, if we go into this land, we're never going to be able to do anything spiritual again. And they came back and made a bad report on the land, which caused us to wander in the desert for an additional 38 years. because they mistook the object of creation that we should run off and be in some kind of spiritual state all the time. And then Korach comes in this same book, and he says, well, if that's not true, then being involved in the world is more important. So we're all equal. Someone who's a cobbler and a this and a that should have the same spiritual, tag, so to speak, as the high priest. In other words, he's saying if we're already involved in the world, then that's the object, to make this world a better place, and you're doing it every day, well, you study, I do that. We're on the same level. But the Torah tells us there's many levels. There are people who are dedicated and who are on a level where they spend 24/7 involved in leading people and being involved in spiritual activities. It's sort of like, he's like the head surgeon at some place. You don't say, well, I read a medical book, I'll go operate on my foot. You go to a doctor who spends all day doing this. So a high priest who is a channel, basically, for spirituality, he is the exemplar of how we can become a channel for something greater than ourselves. And that takes a number of things, but in this week's Parsha, or the culmination of the book of Bamidbar, which is the journeys, is the last 15 chapters of this book. Last bunch of parshas all take place in the same place, are how we have to prepare to come into the land, to come into how the soul has to come into the body. It says in the Pirkei Avot, Al kochacha tol chai ve'al tochacha tomes, against your will you're born, and against your will you'll die. In other words, before the soul comes into the body, remembering that the soul is a part of God above, and it is blown into a material earth, right? That's what happens. It says, "Vayipak b'pav nefesh chaim." God blew into the Adam's nostrils, Adam meaning human, a living soul. So that part of us has the ability to connect to something higher. And the more we connect with it, the more we can channel things that are greater than ourselves. So say we learned something that we don't yet know how to use in our life, but we start studying it, right? That's the way all things are. You learn about something and you get it a little bit, and after some point, it can become part of you. So when you study it in a serious way, there's no small, no matter what it is, it can become part of your vocabulary, so that when you pass it on to someone else, you're not giving them just your wisdom and intellect. You're giving them part of a higher wisdom. And believe me, people recognize this in people who are like that. We recognize that in people who we say are high souls, or that person has a good aura. Aura meaning light. Amy, isn't one of your names Aura? What is it?
Yes, mine is. When you went to the synagogue, Philip, you got the Oralea.
Yeah, you're Auralea, and Amy, what do you?
Aura. That's my Hebrew name. Aura.
Aura.
Or two,
Aura,
Amy?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Chandra, put your face up so you can see Amy. She's
Oh,
great.
I'm sorry. I had to do a few.
Chandra.
Oh,
one second.
Okay.
hello, Aura.
Hi.
Or some mother is Kathy Farmer, who comes here, and they're longtime members of the class.
Yeah.
And or but you see something, you feel something. The way we relate to each other is more amorphous than logical, unless you're just totally onto the business end. And even there, it comes in handy when you develop a spiritual sensitivity. Now, in order to have the flexibility to use your particular talents and stuff, you have to have that place where you are not willing to step over a line called the bottom line. Anybody with no bottom line is going to be in trouble. There's nothing they won't do. I mean, we're talking about a kind of a criminal mentality, but a lot of us certainly don't have that, or we do have it, and we should just nurture it more. How you learn to be nice to people from your parents, how you learn that people matter, things you learn at home, what the Torah says, that you matter, that you were born for a reason. These are your bottom lines. And then you have a certain amount of flexibility, no matter what situation you're in. We may feel like at this moment, this part of the journey, I'm not sure what to do next. But this thing called studying is not, because the Torah is not a book. We're not reading human intellect from one person to another. The Torah is a cosmic interface. It's like the UBS drive between a non-existential reality and this world, because there's not a direct link except through the Torah and mitzvahs, because they represent thought, speech, and action on a very high consciousness level. We want our thought, speech, and action to resemble, since we were created in the B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, we'd like to reflect that some way, and yet with our personality. We're not robots, right? You know, but you can have a lot of people, you know, say everybody here all of a sudden is lighting the Shabbos candles. We're all lighting candles. We're all saying the prayers, but we're each just saying it in a different way. Or that we feel the vibe in our house in a different way. We're thinking of people we lost and people we love. We're bringing peace to our home in a different way. So there's nothing to say. Judaism is not about sameness. It's about giving us a channel that opens up to our own individuality. And that channel, by being through God's grace, we were given very simple things to reach very high places. Because a mitzvah is basically a physical object. Giving charity is a very spiritual act. Studying Torah, helping a friend, saying a blessing. All these things are doable, and they involve material things. But the light that they draw down is from beyond creation. Now, I mean, does a bell go off every time you do it? You know, if that were that, we would be like puppets. You know, it's like no one's I didn't get an extra star, teacher, for doing this or that. It's not like that. It's that your free will is so important to Hashem that he wants you to say, I'm going to connect on this level out of my free will and try to make it mine, and try to use my ego and my sense of self, which I was given, to serve something greater. We don't obliterate our ego. We need our ego to help us function in the world, but it should be for the sake of something higher. So it says that Moses, Moshe, Ishanov Ma'od, Moses was the humblest person on the world. It means that his ego was a channel. He was not a doormat. He faced down Pharaoh. He had a hawk with 3 million Jews every day. Figure out the biggest wedding you could think, and it's not going right, and you're the caterer. That's Moses. He had to deal with like all the stuff. You have to be like a tough cookie, but he knew that his power to deal with certain things came from someplace greater, which more than ego saying, I want to be a star or something, is you are obligated because you were given certain talents and abilities to use them. You are basically obligated to try to reach your potential. The Torah is here to help you reach your potential. And for that, we need some time alone, but we also need community. And we need to be around people who understand certain things like that. It says a person who can write a book and goes off and decides to bake bread instead is like someone, Rabbi Nachman just said this, he's like someone who could have had a baby and he didn't. It was given to you. You can go break the bread, but if you were given a talent, something that you need to do, try to do it. You may not make money, but at least it's that attempt towards being oneself. Where one winds up is something else. But it's asking you to take a lot of thoughts into consideration. We just lived through an era called the me generation. I always wonder which me they were talking about. It didn't seem to be talking about me. Self-help. Every time I read a self-help book, I needed more help. If self-help books work, why do there's so many new ones every day? One of them's got to work. To help the self, you have to get rid of the shapes and the voices that are shaping this self into thinking that it exists on its own. The self is part of something greater, but it's a part that's needed to make the entire whole work. If there's a letter missing from a Torah scroll, we close the Torah scroll, right? If you're reading the Torah and there's a letter that's blocked out or erased, you close the Torah scroll right away. Because Judaism needs every single Jew. God made you, and the minute he made you, he said, you matter. And you wake up one day and you go, I can't matter. Look, I feel bad today. I can't stop doing this. I do that. Well, how can I matter? You matter. There'd be no comedy without it. You ever wonder why a little comedy is Jewish? But Mattot Massei, we're preparing to enter the land, which also, if you're curious, if you've never read these chapters, it gives you the exact boundaries of Israel as they were given to us. We're there because God gave us the land, and here's the instruction book for where it is and how it is. Being in the land also means entering your real self, being able to own your own vulnerability. In these times, we're in a period called the 3 weeks. And during these weeks, the beginning of the end for the Holy Temple started. The walls were breached, and on Tisha B'Av, which is the end of the 3 weeks, was the destruction of the Holy Temple. How many days do we sit Shiva? 7. How many days for Shloshim? 30. Kaddish, 11 months. We are still mourning a temple from 3,000 years ago. How could we be allowed to do that? You're not allowed to sit Shiva for 2 weeks even. It's because it's part of us. It's a channel. It's part of that channel between reality and our existence that was available to us and stayed available as long as we were in line with receiving that light. And then when we closed those channels, there was destruction. You could say, yes, the Babylonians destroyed the first temple and the Romans the second. But if you read our sages, they tell you it became because of things that we did. We were responsible. So you can ask the question, does that mean every time something hard happens to me, I should think it's my fault? Well, no, but it's good to think about, did I do something to contribute to it? Or maybe I need to do tshuva, or maybe I have to go higher. Just add that in. Of course, the main thing is to move past it or use it. If you take the example of a river that's flowing stream, right? It's going very smoothly, and that's the vitality of your life. And all of a sudden, depression and some other things become like a big rock in the middle of the stream. What happens? The stream backs up, right? Or it just gently goes around it. But when you understand the issues and you can use the rock, the water at some point pushes the rock ahead of it. And now not only is it flowing with its own speed, but the rock is clearing everything out of the way. The problem, the challenge made you into a person that can face other things and move them in a way that your spirit can flow more smoothly. This is just from nature. Nature is built that same way. So these 3, I want to say something briefly about the 3 weeks. The Torah, as we've discussed over the years, has different emotional times. Coming out of Egypt as the time of our freedom. Getting the Torah is the time of our getting the Torah. Sukkah is the time of our joy. I mean, they exist all the time, but more emphasis. This time is a time for us to, when we're a little more vulnerable, and to look at the losses and the frustrations in our life. And instead of letting them linger around as low-key depression, say, let me think about them and what happened, and find some way to use them to find the light and the gold that they hold in them. Because whatever it was, they were given to me and they're part of my life, and they don't have to be part of my everyday. Maybe now's the time to talk to some friends about things that happened or disappointments. This is the time for us to engage on our own, not let it happen upon us, but going and saying, yeah, this year this happened. That sickness was really hard. That the COVID did me in. Here's things that happened to me, but do I need them anymore? The COVID seems to be gone. Did I take any, it was really rough. Let me get through that now. But it did make me do this, and made me do that. It's a time set aside because it's a time, it's called the Yerida L'Tzorich Aliyah. It's a descent for the sake of an ascent. If you're on a roller coaster, in order to go, you go down fast as can be, and then you get the speed to go up the other side. So the Hasidim even say that the time in Egypt was not, it was a descent for the purpose of an ascent, because we went in as a family and became one people. We were tribes when we went in. There were 70 of us all together. We were tribes. And when we came out, we were an Am. We were a people. And who's the first person to call us a people? Pharaoh. He said, this people. We came out 210 years later with 3 million people. And now we know what freedom is because we've been slaves. You really have a sense of what it means. A slave is, we weren't prisoners on some level, but we were slaves and prisoners. But I heard an interesting difference between them. A slave is someone who works for someone and they want the benefit of their doubt. You do your work, they want you to, on certain levels, they want you to do well, so it's good for them. There's some investment. With a prisoner, no one cares about you. They wanted us to build their pyramids. Joseph was in prison. No one really cared about him there. But in that time in prison, he was able to be so broken that he was able to let go of any of his selfish ego, and understand that everything came from Hashem. So when he came out, he was fit to be a ruler. Sometimes, I don't know if it was Hemingway said that all people are broken and many are stronger in the broken places. Of course, he wasn't in the end. Well, they give an example of a knot. Say your life is like a knot and you tear the rope. When you retie it, it's much stronger than it was before. You've got 3 or 4 big knots in there. It's not for me to say. So we have 2 main issues in this week to think about. Yes, let me, until Tisha B'Av, think about those things that are bugging me. But I'll think about them on my terms and talk them over and let them not bother me the rest of the year as much as they do. I don't want to wake up with them every morning. I want to talk to them now and say, why do you feel like you have no self-confidence? Why do you feel this? Let me have that dialogue. There's a great benefit in doing that. Facing things straight on. Excuse me. A little because the bottom line for a Jew is you're here for a purpose. God wants you. You matter. And there's great things that you can accomplish. And you have the ability to change. Any little change you make enlarges the mechanism of change itself. There's no saying, oh, if I can't change this, it's not going to really get me. If it gets you anywhere, if you know Aleph and you learn bass, it's a big change. If you play one chord and you can play two chords, it's a big change because you changed. It's the ability, it's that difficulty in changing or being comfortable being. Unfortunately, you can get comfortable in your comfort zone. Better, the Torah says, we should learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's how you'll grow. Anyone who studies any art, when I was growing up listening to music, I always listened to these people. I said, I'll never play any, I'm not going to ever do that. I learned to do what I do, but if you're always around people who are on the same level as you, people have the same situations and stuff, it's hard to make a move. So remember, you have that possibility of change because you have a bottom line that you are part of God's universe, part of God's people. You have many talents. You have the great prospect of reaching your full potential, which studying Torah will help you do. And there's no proof of any of this unless you try it. We've already tried living the way we live. If you add on study in a consistent manner, if you learn one line a day in the morning and in the evening and can keep that up, this is a huge thing. I once had someone in the class here say, give me something to do and change. I said, okay, before you go to bed, read a line in Midrash. He said, no, give me something harder. No, just do that. 2 weeks later, did you do it? No, I was too busy. I fell asleep. One line. It's why? Because the body doesn't want to change. The Yetzer Hara wants to keep the status quo. You don't have to keep the status quo. You don't have to answer when you're angry. You have a lot of self-control. That's why we have something called gevura, which is self-discipline, and strength. The strength to not say something even when you're right, because it's your self-control that's telling you it's not best at this moment. And then you meet people who say, I'm sorry, that's the way I am. I'm always like that. You don't have any self-control. You don't care whose feelings you hurt. We're supposed to applaud you because you can't keep it in. It's not like that. You should have choices. So I thank everybody for tuning in again. May your flexibility grow based on your true individuality, which is as part of something greater, and may you maintain and build on your bottom lines that you have value, potential, and senses of fairness and justice that come from the Torah, and continue to grow. May we continue to meet each week and help each other to keep growing and moving. And this is Rosh Chodesh Av, which is, like I said, the most difficult month of the year because the temples were destroyed. So everybody be a little bit more on your guard. Don't get into any legal battles from here, and if you can avoid them, any legal issues from now until the end of until Tisha B'Av. It's advised not to, unless you have to. And it says, "V'smakva hagaka," be happy. How can you tell someone to be happy? I know people you can't tell them anything. Don't tell me be happy. But you always were happy. When a baby is born, they're happy. Most babies, unless they're sick, they're happy. You're just suggesting to someone, go back to being who you are. All the layers that have surrounded us in life have made me forget who we are. Okay, thank you for tuning in. This is Phillip Namanworth, Creative Spirituality. May everybody have a bracha. Hazak, v'nitzazek. This class tonight is in honor of my nephew who passed away. This is your side. His name was Naftali Binyamin Ben Yechiel Mechel, and David Backer's grandmother, Ruth Bas Chaim, Esther Bas Chaim, and Pesach Binyamin Bekele Yitta is a Fur Shlema. Shandel Bas Brina, and for all those who need good health or having any physical troubles, God should bless you and help heal you. And please, if you have need any suggestions about how to proceed or something you'd like to learn or something, please get in touch with me or Lindy or Shlomo. They'll pass it on to me. I think Shlomo, do we have an email now that people can write to? creativespirituality@gmail.com.
Yeah.
So you can write something. Does it go to your computer? Because I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you want to send me a message or the call or anything, I am open, and other members of this class are open to help everybody. And see you next week. Have a guten Chodesh. Transform the darkness into light, and I'll see you next
Every
week.
soul is a candle. Every soul is a candle of God, sent down